The Washington Wizards were involved in the blockbuster trade of the 2021 offseason as they sent former superstar Russell Westbrook to the LA Lakers. Some people believe this has signified the start of the rebuild, but according to reports, the Wizards have no intention of moving their other all-star player in Bradley Beal, and Beal has no intention of leaving. This therefore continues to leave Washington with the opportunity to provide Beal with some decent help. Many fans believe that the Wizards are destined to drop out of the playoff picture yet again next season after the loss of Russ and with a seemingly mediocre team. But however, I do not believe that this is the case. This team has the potential to still remain a playoff side next season as they've actually quietly had a solid offseason that could allow Beal to flourish even more and possibly in turn land them a postseason berth in 2022. I'll be going over why I believe that in today's video. Before we start, if you're new here and enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe. For more NBA content like this, I'm trying to reach 18,000 subscribers by September, so all support would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, with that being said, let's talk about the Washington Wizards. The first player I believe will help elevate this team to the playoffs is of course Bradley Beal. Beal is undoubtedly the star of the team, and if the Wizards are to have any success next season, he'll be the reason why. Beal is coming off arguably the best individual season of his career, where he almost led the league in points per game, behind only Stephen Curry, averaging a monstrous 31.3 points, 4.4 assists and 4.7 rebounds on nearly 60% true shooting. He and Westbrook made a valiant effort to lift the otherwise mediocre Wizards into the playoffs and lucked out to gain the 8th seed in the play-in tournament, where they eventually were dismantled in 5 games. But it's clear to see that Beal is at the peak of his powers and is making the most positive impact to a winning side in his career. That amazing impact and play he is having is why so many people want to see him traded, because it's clear he could be a difference maker to a team that is on the cusp of being a legitimate contender. However, as much as I and many other NBA fans would want to see him moved so he doesn't waste his prime, Beal is likely to stay on Washington for next season, and I think they'll have to make the most of it. He's proven this past season that he can lead a mediocre team to a lower playoff seed, and honestly, I don't see why he can't do it again. Yes, his co-star in Russell Westbrook is gone now, but the supporting cast around him is still quality and certainly a lot better than the roster around him in 2020, the last time he was a solo star on the team. Beal is at the top of his game right now, and if he can stay healthy, I can assure you that the Wizards have some solid success next year. It may only just be enough for a playoff spot, but I believe with Beal on the squad, they are a great chance to get there. It's really as simple as that. Beal is an all-NBA talent, and that should not be overlooked when considering the Wizards' chances next season. He's a player who wants to win, and I think alone he can still do enough to lift this side into the playoff picture yet again. However, it's not like this will be a pure carry job by Beal to get Washington back into the postseason. This offseason has been really solid for the Wizards quietly, and now they're loaded with some great talent to support Beal and his quest for another playoff spot. So let's take a look at them now. The biggest addition to the Wizards roster this offseason has to be Spencer Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie lost his role on the Nets after the blockbuster Harden trade, and with guys like Bruce Brown stepping up big time as valuable role players for Brooklyn, it was hard to see him finding consistent minutes long term, leading to him joining Washington. After his ACL injury, it's unknown what his player level will be and how similar he is to his old form once he returns. But even with that injury concern, Dinwiddie has proven to be an extremely solid player who can give teams buckets nightly. In his last healthy season, he averaged over 20 points per game and was a big reason why the Nets were still able to make the playoffs in the bubble, even with Kyrie and KD constantly injured, because the play of Dinwiddie was so great. I believe he can provide great value to the Wizards and be able to fill that shot creation and scoring gap that Russell Westbrook will inevitably leave. Dinwiddie was one of the more underrated players in the league before his injury, and if he can return to a similar level and maybe post numbers along the lines of 18 to 20 points behind Beal on league average efficiency, I think he'll be impactful enough to boost this team back towards the playoff picture again in 2022. Another pickup made by the Wizards this offseason was Kyle Kuzma through the Westbrook trade, and honestly, this is a pretty underrated addition. As inconsistent as Kuzma has been the past couple of seasons, and as much as Lakers fans despise him, I don't think he's that bad. Like yeah, he's not great by any stretch and has plenty of things to improve on, but he's still young with a ton of potential. In a new starter role for the Wizards and with no pressure on him to be great, he could flourish. We've seen former young talents of the Lakers do the same thing with a change of scenery out of LA. Namely Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram. They both took off in their careers once departing the Lakers, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a similar thing happen with Kyle Kuzma. Again, Kuzma is still young and barely hitting his prime. I think if we're patient this season and let Kuzma be him, he could develop into something really solid for the Wizards and help push them towards a playoff spot. I mean, this is a guy who played a pretty large role on a championship team a few years back. He shouldn't be expected to be an all-star, but I think we can expect him to positively impact the Wizards moving forward. He's got a decent offensive game and the tools physically to be at least an average defender, so I truly do think we could see a coming-of-age type season from Kuzma next year, and potentially a good enough individual season to see Washington make a playoff push. Again, there's definitely question marks around Kuzma's ability, but I'm going to be more optimistic here and say we get a good year out of him in 2022. Along with Kuzma in that Westbrook trade, the Wizards received Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Montrezl Harrell. KCP is a solid role player and was instrumental to the success of the Lakers last season, though they fell short due to injuries. He's a good shooter and perimeter defender, and is overall a reliable player off the bench now for Washington. He's going to bolster the depth of this team and make the second unit actually somewhat decent moving forward. Same goes for Montrezl Harrell. As much of a defensive liability as he can be, he's also a high-energy player who's improving offensively. Put him in the pick and roll with Beal or Dinwiddie, and you're getting some good looks the majority of the time. At this point, I expect Harrell comes off the bench as guys like Thomas Bryant are returning to the Wizards lineup from injury. But again, to have a player like him off the bench is a positive and adds to the depth and versatility of the lineup that the Wizards can run next season. So to me, those two players are good additions for the Wizards. As I mentioned, a player returning to the Wizards lineup next season that I'm excited to see play is Thomas Bryant. Bryant was injured last season, so didn't play many games at all, and will still be out until at least December sadly. But in the small sample size that he did play, he posted career best figures. At just 24 years old, Bryant has a bright future ahead of him, and I expect him to be a starter of the team moving forward once he does return and is back in form. He's a good piece to use in the pick and roll actions, he's a hard screener and can finish lobs pretty well. We saw his play with Westbrook and how good he could be in those actions. Even with Russ gone now though, Bryant still brings a lot to the table because he can do a lot more than just under the basket. Bryant shot over 40% from 3 last season, and again, while that was a small sample size, it was on 2 attempts per game, and was just as good as his shooting from the 2020 season, where he also shot 40+% from deep on 2 attempts per game. That spacing and shooting threat is going to be critical next season for Beal to succeed, so his return is definitely a huge bonus for Washington going into 2022. Finally, the last player that I believe will be key for the Wizards next season is Rui Hachimura. Hachimura was fantastic in the Olympics and had some incredible scoring performances for Japan. With some more experience under his belt, Rui will be confident heading into 2022. And maybe with some more shots headed his way, we could see him take a decent leap as a solid starter for the team moving forward. So those are all the guys on the Wizards roster that I believe will be very impactful for their playoff chances next season. But how good is this team actually? How do they stack up against the rest of the competition out east, and where do they realistically end up? Right now, I probably have the Wizards finishing 8th to 10th realistically, so in the play-in tournament range. A lot of Eastern Conference teams got better this offseason, namely Chicago and Miami, so I definitely don't see the Wizards making a jump in the standings. However, we can't forget about how good Beal has been the last couple seasons, so I definitely don't think that the Wizards will drop off and remain a legitimate playoff contender for next season. Right now, I'd consider the 76ers, Nets, Bucks, Hawks, Heat, Celtics and Bulls as the teams to be better than Washington, and I'd probably put the Knicks in there too, to be honest, with their latest signing of Kemba Walker, so that has the Wizards around the 9th range in the East on paper. We all know injuries play a major factor in the standings though, so if a couple of these teams struggle due to injuries, that may open the door a bit for Washington. Even if that doesn't happen though, the play-in tournament will be making a return in 2022, so that gives the Wizards even more hope for another berth, even if a team like Indiana bounces back next season as well. Overall, it'll be difficult, and the Wizards are probably just scraping in if they do make it, but I've got confidence they'll be able to remain in the 7 to 10 seed territory throughout the majority of next season. So with that all being said, these are my thoughts on the Washington Wizards. The team had an underrated offseason, and they've acquired many solid pieces that can help establish this team as a playoff side again next season, even with Westbrook gone. They've got some improved depth, bolstered their defense a bit, and have got plenty of serviceable options to surround Beal with. As much as I disagree with the Wizards' decision to hang on to Beal for yet another season, I can understand why they do it, and still see the positives in the situation. This isn't a bottom-feeding side, this is still a team with playoff aspirations. And when you have a player as offensively talented as Beal is, a guy who has just tasted some postseason action and is coming off the best season of his career, it would be disrespectful to not give this team every shot to make it back. It'll be tough, but I have faith that the Washington Wizards will be a playoff side yet again in 2022. And that will conclude the video. What do you guys think of this? How good will the Wizards be next season to you? Can they still make the playoffs, or will they slip out? What are your thoughts on their offseason so far? Let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop it a like and subscribe. But with that being said, I am out. Peace.